Sign up for a year and pay less than 71 pesos per month. Visit tmt.ph/digital to get your free 30 days of the Manila Times Digital Edition.
What do you see in your future? Us? We see unlimited possibilities. This is why we are evolving to BPI AIA. To keep up with your ever-changing needs and to help bring you to the future you've always wanted. A future where you can live your life to the fullest. Where the people you love are better protected. Where everything is easier and faster. We're changing the way you live as we combine decades of local expertise, innovation, and leadership with the strength of one of Asia's largest life insurance companies. Count on us to keep evolving as fast as you do, to give you more protection and better services that will help you live healthier, longer, better lives. This is what we see in your future. And that future begins today. This is the new BPI AIA.
alanganan, alon ng puso sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang inilang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manluluti, di ka pasisiil, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bughaw. May dalagang dula at awit sa paglayang inahay, ang kislap ng wataw at lu'y tagumpay na nagniningning, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magniningning. Luma ng araw ng walhati at sinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pag may mga atin na pumatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Good day. Thank you for joining us on the Manila Times Online Business Forum, where we discuss the pressing issues that involve overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs, our so-called modern-day bayani or heroes. My name is Dafort Villasaran, and I am the Manila Times or TMT editor, your co-moderator for today. Co-moderating with me is Peter Conrad Carino, the Manila Times business editor. Hi, Conrad. This is Dafort Villasaran. I am the Manila Times or TMT editor. Your co-moderator for today. Co-moderating is Peter Conrad Manila Times business. Hi, Conrad. Hi, Conrad. And I am the Manila Times or TMT editor. Your co-moderator for today. Is Peter Conrad Manila Times.
Overseas have already casted their votes, and I think that's going to increase over the next days. And I think there's so much optimism on this voting, because you've seen a lot of people lining up in the embassies, and that spells and I think that's a very good omen, because that means that Filipinos are expecting the next administration to at least prop up the economy, and also. You've seen a lot of these OFWs, so that means they're still abroad, and they are also optimistic about the work prospects in the nations where they are staying right now.
Yes, that's interesting to hear. Definitely the OFW voice is something to be reckoned with, and definitely will make itself felt in the upcoming election. Now, I'm curious to know, have you ever worked abroad or had a family member close to you, or even close friends who tried to find employment overseas? And if so, how was that experience for you personally in your relationship with them?
Well, I had an invitation to work before, or to apply for work in Canada. That was, I think, 30 years ago, and the prospect was very good. But I regret not snapping up on that opportunity. But my sister was recruited to work as a public school teacher in Maryland, and that was also where she obtained her advanced studies, and everything went very well. I mean, she was asked to stay and even pursue her doctorate there, but she decided to go home and take care of my parents. But because she studied there, I mean, when she came back, she had a lot of credentials. When she came back, she had a lot of credentials. So it was a very, very positive experience for her.
Well, I'm sure that's very relatable for many of our viewers today. For my part, I served 2 contracts for a total of about 4 years as an OFW myself in the communications field. I worked in the city of Muscat in the Sultanate of Oman almost a decade ago. Now, Oman is the large country right beside the United Arab Emirates, if you're familiar with the UAE. And if you've heard of the 7 Voyages of Sinbad the Sailor or the 1001 Arabian Nights, perhaps you're familiar with it.
No, I actually have read much of that since I was a child, but perhaps you can refresh me on that. I mean, I'd love to. Please refresh me.
Well, according to legend, what later came to be known as the Sultanate of Oman was the birthplace or the origins of Sinbad. At least the legend had originated there. And now this country, Oman, is, like I mentioned, right next to UAE, where for many of our viewers are probably familiar or are actually in Abu Dhabi or Dubai. And you personally, I'm sure, as a racing aficionado, you're probably familiar with the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in the Yes Marina circuit, aren't you?
Well, all I can say is that any country that hosts a Formula One race is very rich, because to build a track alone, you need billions of dollars, and to host a race, I think you need something like at least $200 million. I mean, that's at least. And that's a very big event. And every F1 race is a big PR event for a country because it basically shows the world that we're rich. And it also shows that the Middle East is evolving into a country that also wants to do good in tourism, and that's also good for our OFWs. I mean, if the Middle East becomes a haven for tourism, that means they need more workers, and most likely they will recruit here from the Philippines.
Yeah, truly. You mentioned Canada, you mentioned the Middle East. Many of our countrymen really go out to find that grand prize of prosperity in the Middle East, Mediterranean, Central Europe, North Africa, even North America, and the Asian countries nearby and Pacific Islands. So, especially now with the easing of lockdowns in the countries in these territories, what have you observed in terms of the business angle regarding our OFWs? So, what do you think the future holds in store for them?
Well, all I can say is that the World Bank has so far made positive forecasts for global economic growth this year. They have not made anything. Anything negative on the global economic forecast. But what I fear is the effects of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. But fortunately, we don't have that much workers or workers deployed in Russia or Ukraine. I mean, it must be less than 1,000. But overall, for as long as the Russia-Ukraine conflict, I mean, the effects of it does not influence other countries. I believe that we will be seeing more and more Filipinos seeking greener pastures abroad in the next months or even years.
Yeah, those are the very keen observations you made there, and I think that's why on the future of the OFWs, or the country's economic heroes, we also made this the title of our online business forum for today. This forum that we have right now allowed us to invite the following, or a certain number of specialists in the field and industry to be able to give us more in-depth insights and maybe to validate the trends that you've observed. So for our guest speakers, we have some from the newly created Department of Migrant Workers, of course, the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA, and we also have representatives from the business sectors, the Marlow Navigation Philippines Incorporated and the Southeast Asian Placement Center Incorporated. Perhaps you'd like to introduce some of our speakers.
Yes, we are honored to have this morning Migrant Workers Secretary Abdullah Mamao, OWA Administrator Hans Leo Kakdak, Marlow Navigation President and CEO Antonio Galvez Jr., and SEAPC President Joel Ong. Welcome and thank you, gentlemen, for being today's speakers on for this morning's The Manila Times online forum titled "The Future of OFWs, the Country's Economic Heroes." And definitely, they will continue to be our heroes in the next years to come.
Conrad, I think I was informed by our tech team. Mr. Hans will be unable to join us, but he did ask Mr. Arnel Ignacio. I'm sure you may be familiar with him.
Yes,
he'll be taking the place of Mr. Hans to represent OWA.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, sir. Welcome. Thanks for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Hello, gentlemen. Incidentally, our forum today won't be possible without the welcome support of our sponsors. So we'd like to thank them. Our special partners are BPI, AIA Life Assurance Incorporated, and Philinvest Land Incorporated. We also have organization partners, British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, the Cebu Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the French Chamber of Commerce and Industry in the Philippines. We have the Davao City Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or DCCII, the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines, better known as FINEX, the Italian Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines, also known as ICCPI, and MAP, or the Management Association of the Philippines. We also have the Nordic Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, the Philippine Center for Islam and Democracy, and She Talks for Peace. And of course, our media partner is the Manila Times TV.
Yeah, thank you, forum partners.
Well, certainly, the Manila Times is grateful for their being on board with us. And now, it's time to board our train of thought regarding the future of the OFWs, the country's economic heroes, with our first keynote speaker. Now, he was appointed by President Rodrigo Duterte himself on March 9, 2022, as the head of the very fresh, very timely also, Migrant Workers Department. This incorporates the former Philippine Overseas Employment Administration, as well as other related government agencies. And this also oversees the OWA we mentioned earlier as part of its, as an attached agency. Now, prior to his appointment, he was the presidential advisor on OFWs and Muslim concerns. Now, he has flown to the Middle East on several special assignments in the past, and particularly in 2018, he was designated as a special envoy to Kuwait. And like the president, he earned his law degree from San Beda in 1972. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you our first speaker, Secretary Abdullah Mamao. Assalamu alaikum, Secretary Mamao. The screen is now yours. Shall we, Secretary Mamao? Conrad, are you picking up Secretary Mamao's broadcast?
None at the moment. Perhaps he's having some, I think, these minor technical problems.
We, while we're waiting for Secretary Mamao to come through, I'd like to mention that we actually have some viewers giving greetings from Myanmar and Singapore. So hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us, our viewers from those two places. We seem to still be having technical difficulties with. Perhaps we'll proceed with our second speaker in the meantime.
Okay.
All right. If
I think he's getting ready.
I think it's okay.
Yeah, he just places. Hello, Secretary Mamao. Good morning.
hello, Secretary.
Good morning. Good morning.
Oh, yan,
How are
see?
you?
Yan. There. We're glad to see you now.
Yeah, we are ready. We are ready.
Salam alaikum, Secretary.
Salam. Alaikum salam. Yeah.
Yes. Please, if you are ready, go ahead. We're eager to hear your talk, your speech.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to everyone. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to all of you. One of the visions that the Duterte administration was able to achieve is the creation of the Department of Migrant Workers. As the first ever Secretary of the Sea Department, I was entrusted by the President to uphold his vision of serving our beloved overseas Filipino workers for their protection and welfare. Relative to this, various offices will be merged into one department. These are the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration, the Office of the Undersecretary for Migrant Workers Affairs, the International Labor Affairs Bureau, including all the Philippine Overseas Labor Offices, the National Reintegration Center for OFWs, the National Maritime Polytechnic, and the Office of the Social Welfare, attaché in the Department of Social Welfare and Development. Meanwhile, the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration will be an attached agency of the department. With the proliferation of various illegal recruitment schemes that were designed to offer lucrative yet illegal offers to our OFWs, the creation of the Department of Migrant Workers is a must. The mandate provided by the law ensures that our OFWs will have an opportunity to obtain the best possible conditions of work. As encapsulated in the Declaration of Policies of the DMW Act, we shall uphold the dignity of the OFWs, provide timely and responsive services to address their needs regardless of legal status, ensuring their participation in the formulation of policies affecting their welfare, and provide mechanisms for skills development and reintegration. I would also like to emphasize that as one of the largest labor-sending countries in the world, it is but better to protect the welfare of our OFWs in the best means possible. However, this is in no way tantamount that the government promotes overseas employment. As stated in the DMW Act, we will continue to maintain that overseas employment is a choice and not a necessity. Under my leadership, we will create various programs and maintain the best ones to ensure that the reintegration of our OFWs is properly coordinated and implemented, as the best practices that we implement in terms of overseas employment have been emulated by other labor-sending nations. We have to make sure that we maintain or go beyond the best practices that we have made. In the initial implementation of the Department of Migrant Workers, we have finished and published the implementing rules and regulations on April 6, 2022. The same took effect 15 days after its publication on April 21, 2022. To date, the technical working group is in progress in creating the staffing pattern for the Department of Migrant Workers. Subsequently, the proposed budget for the fiscal year 2023 will also be submitted to the Department of Budget and Management relative to the 2023 General Appropriations Act. While we are conducting the meetings of the Transition Committee to satisfy the requisites for the full operation of the department, we have also noted the need for the deployment of the affected workers to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Thus, we have issued Department Order Number 04, Series of 2022, which states the lifting of the deployment ban for the new hires domestic workers to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, dated 4 April 2022. Relative to the money claims involved, I will ensure that the affected Filipino migrant workers will receive a judicial satisfaction of their legal battle. The temporary suspension of the verification of new hires was based on the memorandum issued by Secretary Silvestre Billion, dated 25 November 2021, to the remittances of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. This temporary suspension might have a legal effect on the relationship of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with the Philippines, along with the Gulf operating countries in the Middle East. In effect, our economy might suffer as we are going to be one of the top labor-sending countries to the Middle East. We cannot deny that our OFWs are considered as our economic heroes. Based on the data shared by Manila Times, the number of overseas contract workers decreased to 1.71 million in 2020 from 2.11 million in 2019. As a consequence, the total remittances sent in 2020 reached 134.77 billion pesos, which was lower than the 200 10.40 billion pesos reported in 2019. In this light, the Department of Migrant Workers shall continue to implement the best practices on overseas employment. After all, the newly created department is a legacy that is created for our beloved modern and economic heroes, the Filipino migrant workers. Thank you very much.
Shukran jazilan for that very informative speech, Secretary. Regarding your talk, we have a whole lot of questions for you that we'll be able to raise toward the end of our forum. Will you be able to stay with us till the other three speakers are done with their talks so that we can field questions then?
Definitely, definitely.
Okay, thank you very much. For now, it's time to introduce our second speaker. However, our second speaker is a public figure and a celebrity in his own right and needs actually very little introduction. But allow me to mention a few of his professional milestones. He has been a TV host for GMA7 Network, ABS-CBN Network, and TV5 from 1997 to 2008. He has been Assistant Vice President for Community Relations and Services Department of the Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation, or PAGCO. And for OWA, he has been Deputy Administrator for Media and Public Relations, and then Deputy Administrator for Administration and Fund Management for the Overseas Workers Welfare and Administration. So, ladies and gentlemen, may I present Mr. Arnaldo Arnel Ignacio. Hello, good afternoon, good day.
Good day, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure, and I'd like to ably represent Admin Hans Kakdak. I may be a veteran in the television industry, but relatively a neophyte in this field. But I really hope I can pass all the tests today. Good morning, Secretary.
We're very grateful that you're able to.
Okay. Now let me just start by as we are talking about the future of our OFWs, like to say that the OWA in the future will remain as an attached agency of the Department of Migrant Workers. But most of the time, people get confused as to what the function of OWA is. Currently, even the functions of the Bureau of Quarantine, the Department of Health, is all attributed to OWA. That's why may I start my portion, my talk, by introducing to you some of the what OWA is. So if I may share something on the screen, a brief introduction of what OWA is. Thank you very much. And what the functions of OWA is. Okay, this is OWA, the lead government agency tasked to protect and promote the welfare and interests of OFWs and their families. Membership institution created in 1977 as a welfare and training fund for overseas workers, renamed to OWA in 1987, institutionalized as an NGA in 2016 through RA 10801. A twin mandate to deliver welfare services and benefits and ensure sustainability and viability of the OWA fund. So next page, please. Now, as an attached agency, the OWA created under the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration Act. It's hereby attached to the department for purposes of policy and program coordination. So in the future, OWA will be the surviving attached agency, and we would be working very closely with the Department of Migrant Workers. Except as provided under SAC, the OWA shall continue to function in accordance with its charter. The OWA fund, pursuant to Section 37 and 38 of its charter, shall be used for the welfare of member OFWs and their families, and no fund shall be withdrawn from the OWA fund to respond, aid, supplement, or in any manner augment any required expenditure by other government agencies. Next page, please. Now, here we have a massive menu of the benefits that our OFWs can derive from OWA. For education and training, as seen here, we have educational for development scholarship programs. Let me expound on this. We have the OFW Dependent Scholarship Program, Skills for Employment Scholarship Program. This, saan ba yun dito? Ito, Skills provides this, it's a very interesting scholarship program for OFWs, the SESP, or the Skills for Employment Scholarship Program. This provides technical vocational training assistance to up to a maximum of 14,500 per course to active members of OFWs and their dependents at any TESDA accredited training centers. We also have the Seafarers Upgrading Program. This intends to provide job-related training in upgrading the knowledge, skills, and develop expertise among Filipino seafarers in accordance with technological advancements and global maritime standards. Information technology, to IT, and for social benefits program, we provide disability and dismemberment benefit. A member is entitled to disability dismemberment benefit of up to 100,000 pesos for injury sustained due to accident while working abroad. Qualified are active OWA members. Death and burial benefits. The family of an active OWA member at the time of his or her death is entitled to receive 100,000 pesos if the cause of death is natural, and 200,000 if the cause of death is accident. On top of the death benefit, a rider of 20,000 pesos will be received by the beneficiaries for the funeral expenses. Education and livelihood assistance. In fact, just before I joined this webinar, we were having a meeting with Ms. Toots Ople with Panda. We're coming up with another program for our OFWs in partnership with Panda. For our departing OFWs, we offer the pre-departure education program through the PDOS, or the pre-departure orientation seminar, and cultural familiarization and language training for domestic workers. On-site welfare assistance. We also provide hospital and jail visitation, relief assistance, counseling, temporary shelters. And for repatriation, where all you see us in the airport, we assist our OFWs, including human remains, assistance in repatriation them. And for the OFWs who have decided to stay in the Philippines, not work anymore abroad, we have our several reintegration program, individual and group program, enterprise development and loan programs. These are loan programs that we do in partnership with Land Bank, and several others like Tulong Puso and a host of other reintegration programs that we have through the NRCO and financial literacy program. Next page, please. As you can see, gentlemen, from 2015 to 2020, for our several scholarship programs, this is what we have provided our OFWs. For example, the Education for Development Scholarship Program, in 2020, we had 1,790 scholars and new 828 new scholars. And the OFW Dependent Scholarship Program, this is an interesting scholarship program that OWA provides. This is for our OFWs with the maximum earning of $600. So ito ay binibigay natin sa kanila, and we have 4,028 maintained scholars here, and new scholars 1,360. And you can observe that we had a significant increase of beneficiaries during President Rudy Duterte's term. We also have this Education and Livelihood Assistance Program, or the ELAP, 5,124 beneficiaries, and new beneficiary 426. And this Balik Pinas, Balik Hanap Buhay, which is very, very popular among our OFWs, is for those workers who were not able to finish their contract, and we categorize them as distressed workers. And usually they get trainings from us and then provide them with the fund of 20,000. And a host of others like ELAP, livelihood, disability, and that we have discussed it already. Next page, please. And would like to present to you a video of what of OWA's participation, very active participation during the quarantine period, as to how we took part in taking care of our OFWs during those very, very trying times. Here it is.
Arnel, would you be able to give us a bit of a background on what we're viewing right now?
No, when I may.
Arnel, are you getting any audio on this?
Okay.
I think we had some technical difficulty there, but maybe you can explain a bit of what we were viewing.
Did we lose audio during the last part?
Yes, actually, there were a lot of comments from our viewers that they could not hear. There was no sound or audio.
Was it the whole video?
Most of it, yes.
Oh dear. So, do you think we need to repeat it? We need to play it again?
If you can, you can bring the sound. If you can adjust the sound, that might be
Okay.
good.
Yeah. We'll play it again. Well, apologies for the technical difficulty.
But like we were mentioning, there were a lot of documents shown, a lot of footage of the efforts of the OWA to help OFWs reintegrate and assimilate back into the countries at the time of COVID.
Yeah, I started by introducing some of the details of what OWA does, so that during the open forum and the question and answer portion, we can direct it to exactly what the role of OWA is. Kasi most of the time, gentlemen, lahat ng responsibilities, akala ng tao, OWA ang gumagawa eh. So we really need to
narrow down the scope. Yes. Okay.
Yes. Okay. If, again,
how's your? You want to try again? Maybe
Okay.
the audio is better now.
Okay.
Since the onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020, the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration has been working 24/7 and tirelessly on the front lines to ensure the safe return of our overseas Filipinos to their families. Under the mandate of the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases, OWA collaborated with various government agencies and departments to ensure efficient government response to prevent the spread of the pandemic in the Philippines. After more than a year of dealing with COVID-19, the IATF established a set of protocols to follow for returning overseas Filipinos. This is how it would be known to be as the OWA OFW quarantine operations. Here is a walkthrough of the OWA quarantine care. First, upon arrival to the airport of returning OFWs, they will be triaged for enlisting for hotel quarantine booking. After encoding and other airport arrival protocols, OFWs will be transported via bus facilitated by OWA bus officers to their assigned hotel quarantine facility for the start of their mandatory quarantine. OFWs will spend 5 days in isolation before they will be administered swab testing by the Bureau of Quarantine through the Philippine Coast Guard medical teams. OWA's quarantine facilities are manned with house parents to monitor and assist OFWs with concern about their necessities. Roving OWA medical personnel are also present for OFWs with medical conditions. OWA also partnered with Fabello Hospital, National Children's Hospital, and the National Center for Mental Health for any urgent medical emergencies. During our OFW stay, they have access to information available via OWA Quarantine Operations Facebook page, OWA official Facebook page, OWA website, and the Uwian na app or portal. The RT-PCR test results are released directly to the OFWs via the IATF automated system. For OFWs with COVID-19 positive results, they will be endorsed to the Bureau of Quarantine for stringent facilities for further medical protocol. Whereas for OFWs who tested negative, they will be transported to terminals or ports depending on their homebound destination. For Visayas and Mindanao-bound OFWs, they will be transported to NAIA Terminal 1 for OWA domestic chartered flights. For Luzon-bound OFWs, they will be transported to the Parañaque Integrated Terminal Exchange or PITX for OWA chartered buses bound to any point in Luzon. Whereas those who would be going home via seaports will be endorsed to the Department of Transportation and Marina for sea travel. The OWA Regional Welfare Office, in coordination with the LGUs, will provide the final transportation service for returning OFWs. Aside from OWA's ongoing quarantine care, OWA has also been proactive in developing policies and programs that would cater to OFWs' needs during this time of the pandemic. Some of these programs are grants for displaced OFWs in the form of the Dole OWA AKAP, which gives 10,000 financial assistance to returning overseas Filipinos directly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. As our integration program, immediately launched was the Tulong Puso program, a one-time livelihood financial grant that supports startup or expansion of entrepreneurial undertaking of OFW organizations with returnees or members. As for dependents of OFWs, there are educational assistance that would help ease OFWs' worries. Project Ease is a 10,000 educational assistance for a maximum of 4 years in college level to qualify dependent of an active OWA member OFW at the time of repatriation to the country. Meanwhile, the Tabang OFW program is a 30,000 one-time financial assistance for college-level OFW dependents who are displaced or who died during the time of the pandemic. Lastly, OWA would like to recognize the strong men and women personnel who have been working non-stop to deliver OWA's special services to our dear kababayans. From overseas posts to our regional welfare offices, from bus officers, medical personnel, and monitoring teams, OWA salutes those who stood on the front lines during this pandemic. As the primary agency tasked to protect and promote the welfare and well-being of OFWs and their families, OWA's priority during this pandemic is to bring each OFW's home, fast, safe, and secured. We are proud to extend OWA's signature care to OFWs and their families.
Okay, stop sharing. Okay, thank you very much. But OWA, in a nutshell, is the OFW's tatay, nanay, ate, kuya, nakababatang kapatid, and ninong, all rolled into one agency. And I'd like to report to you also that during the pandemic, OWA was able to bring home to their respective regions about 1,009,719 OFWs. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Arnel. Bringing home 1 million plus OFWs, that's a gargantuan task.
Yes.
I just could not imagine the logistics or even the personal or resources you have to deploy to achieve that. But nonetheless, we congratulate the OWA for performing its tasks. And yeah, please stick around because I'm very sure that we have a lot of questions that will be fielded about OWA and towards you at the end of this forum. So let me now introduce our third speaker. Okay. He was born in Mandaue, Cebu in 1959 and was a working student and became a graduate of General Radio Communications in 1978 from the Asian Institute of Applied Electronics. From 1980 to 1989, he was employed as a seafarer working as a radio officer. And from 1990 to 1994, he worked as a crew superintendent for the Columbia Ship Management based in Cyprus. And he came home to work as training officer with Career Philippines Ship Management Limited from 1994 to 1995. And then he started the manning business in 1995 and maritime training in 1998. Concurrently, he is the president of the United Marine Training Center Incorporated, president CEO administration of Marlow Navigation Philippines, and director of Galant Maritime Services Inc. So let us welcome our third speaker, Mr. Antonio Galvez Jr. Mr. Galvez, you can take the floor. Thank you very much. Mr. Galvez.
Yes, hi. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Good morning.
Okay, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Good, thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank Manila Times for the invitation in today's event. And I would like also to take this opportunity to congratulate the Honorable Abdullah Mamao for being appointed as the Secretary of the Department of Migrant Workers. Hello, Sir Arnel. Good morning, everyone. So I was actually tasked to present how the seafarers cope up with the requirements under the new normal. And allow me to start with my presentation with the objective. The objective of this presentation is indeed, first of all, to understand the challenges that our seafarers are being confronted with during the heights of the pandemic. So we also want to see how they are coping up during the pandemic, and of course, at the same time, how they are coping up with the new normal requirements in the days to come. In my summary, I would like to present the seafarers' challenge in the heights of the pandemic. I would like to see and present to you as well how they are coping up with the new work requirements. Later on, we will define what new work requirements are we referring to. Then, what are the role of the licensed manning agencies in assisting our seafarers, our modern day heroes? Actually, allow me to take our company, Marlon Navigation, as the model in this presentation. But I'm very much confident that majority, if not all, of our licensed manning industry, manning agents in the industry are probably doing the same. And finally, I would like to come up with my conclusion. So now, the challenges in the heights of the pandemic brought about by the unfortunate situations that we had all experienced. First of all, we have some delay in our deployment that was due to port restrictions. You know, everyone is more or less apprehensive, and there are a lot of port restrictions. At the end of the day, there comes also the flight restrictions. In order to get on board flights, you need to follow certain medical protocols. The high cost of airfare is also one of the contributing factors that delay the deployment. Here, the law of supply and demand comes into play. Unfortunately, there are very few airlines that are operating, and there are a lot of seafarers who would want to come home, and a lot of seafarers also would want to join the ship. What is aggravating here also is on the day of the departure of our seafarers, they have to submit themselves for swab tests, and ultimately, the result turns out to be positive. So instead of joining the ship, they cannot join, they have to proceed to the isolation areas. Inconvenient ports is also one of the issues here. Ship owners would want to save cost when it comes to the departing seafarers, and also for those who are signing up seafarers. Inconvenient ports like Africa, and we know that ships are trading everywhere. So in order to identify the best possible ports, we have to ensure that ports are indeed convenient for our seafarers to sign off and also to join. Another issue here that we have identified is indeed the lockdown. Imagine the seafarers are already in their boarding houses because they're expecting deployment. And if you will recall, on March 17 of 2020, our seafarers have been stuck up. They're locked down in their dormitories. They cannot go back home. They cannot join the ships. And eventually, their funds ran out. Another issue is actually battling the emotional tendencies. During the heights of the pandemic, we are very much inclined into several issues: mental issues, stress, depression. We are all fearful about COVID infection. We also have some fear about leaving the family, fear of isolation. There are a lot of uncertainties that's happening all around. And of course, overthinking, emotional phenomenon, these are another issues that our seafarers are battling with. Loss of economic opportunities. During the pandemic, we know that there were a lot of companies that went bust. They went belly up. So the unemployment actually increases. And this even affects our seafarers. You know, we cannot deploy people from Manila. We cannot sign off people from the ship. At the end of the day, they are very much overdue in their task on board, and this is indeed prone to possible accidents because of stress, overthinking, overwork. And when you don't have employment, you are basically holding the knife by the blade, because you have to apply for loan with exorbitant interest. So the debts are rising, and you cannot pay your monthly amortization. You have some debts. Then, of course, there comes the loan default. Eventually, the bank eventually forecloses your properties. What can you do? There's really not much you can do there. And another thing is the career stagnation. You know, those seafarers like me were very much focused into the future, personal advancement, career advancement. But what can be done if you're stuck up? There's really not much you can do. You cannot even contribute into the economic progress of our country because you have no employment. You are not on board. You cannot send allotments. So, sorry. So here, we have to, identify how our seafarers are coping up with the new work requirements. But first, we have to identify the requirements before they even step on board the ship. So one of the identified requirements here are the vaccination certificate. They need to have vaccination before they can leave the country. They have to undergo RT-PCR tests prior to departure of a validity between 72 hours, sometimes 48 hours. It depends on their country of destination. So there are also ports, or let's say port of destination, that requires isolation of a seafarer before they can join the vessel, like in Singapore, for example. In the early days, they require seafarers to be isolated for 21 days, then 14 days. As the pandemic eases, now is 7 days. So these are the things that also that's part of the work requirements that they have to undergo. Another thing, you need to have valid travel documents. But what can we do if what can be done if let's say in our departments where people are working from home, so lesser people in the department working, that means there's a delay of renewal of our travel documents. There are also training that are needed because first you need to upgrade your competency, you have to upgrade your skills. Then I'll bring you to the, of course, the issue of the accessibility to vaccine and boosters. Remember, in the early days, we have scarcity of vaccines. There are just very few vaccines that have arrived into our country. And after identifying our seafarers as the key workers, then they were given priority. So that at least eases their burden. So in collaboration with DOH and the BOQ, Marina have identified more vaccination sites for our seafarers. Here, we also need to ensure that our licenses, the certificate of competency and certificate of proficiency, including STCW certificates, are all valid. And we are very thankful to Marina for bridging the gap, for allowing the licenses to be extended. Marina have also provided online appointment through MISMO, or the Maritime Integrated Seafarers Management Online. And therefore, the physical presence were only limited once the certificate is due for release. On the other hand, Marina continues to improve their position and eventually put up the or integrated the Marina Competency Review Portal, or what we call the CRP, because this provides online review and examination. This is a very phenomenal achievement. Unlike before, seafarers need to review in the training center, in the review center before they can take the examination. This time, it's a different ballgame. Seafarers can just sit down in front of the computer in the CRP, taking their own review, and eventually take the examination. So this hastens the possible upgrading of the licenses of our seafarers. And what is more important here is that the review materials that Marina is providing is the same examinations that our seafarers are taking. So for us, this is indeed very beneficial for the seafarers. The skills and competency training. As I mentioned earlier, you need to improve, you need to upgrade your competency, you need to develop further skills in order to be competent by the time you step on board the ship. That means we have to resolve into, during the pandemic, we have to resolve into hybrid training. There's a combination of virtual and face-to-face. Virtual is very effective when it comes to theoretical information, and practical on the face-to-face as the need arise. So we also have to upgrade the licenses because our seafarers need to continuously be assured that their professions are being improved. So here, I have to share with you the assistance of the manning agencies. Please understand that the seafarers are indeed correlated with the manning agencies. These modern day heroes are actually regulated by government like the POEA and now Department of Migrant Workers. And therefore, we have to ensure that the role of the licensed manning agencies are able to provide assistance to our overseas Filipino workers, particularly our seafarers. So, as I mentioned earlier, we have some difficulties in signing off our seafarers. And there are very few available flights because normally flights are half empty, if not really almost empty when they come home and eventually when they fly home. So at the end of the day, the airlines, most of them or some of them actually went bust. They ceased their operation. So there are very limited flights available. And there are a lot of seafarers who would want to sign off and come home. And at the same time, those overstaying seafarers ashore or at home would like to have their gainful employment. So being their employer, we are duty bound to arrange safe arrival, and licensed manning agents usually pool their seafarers in one location, say in ports in Europe, and then they have enough people, they have enough seafarers. They charter the flight coming home, and we charter the flights for our seafarers going back to Europe. So we have to arrange, other possible means to sign off our seafarers. So in some cases, in collaboration with ship managers or ship owners, we have to divert the vessel to convenient port, if only to appease the seafarers who are overstaying on board. You may also recall that by the end of May in 2020, there were more than 20 passenger ships lined up in the Manila Bay. And this is also one of the efforts the ship owners have taken in view of the less flights available and due to the growing concern of the pandemic and business is down. people needs to come home. So they were here eventually. This is one of the redirection of the vessels to convenient port. As a company, of course, we understand the position of our seafarers, myself being one, and we provide interest-free loans to our seafarers, particularly during cases of emergencies and calamities. You can stop these things occurring, and being a responsible managing agent like many others, we are also assisting our seafarers for some interest-free loans. Yes, to ensure the safety of our seafarers, we also provide free transportation when they are joining the ship to the airport or in seaport. We also ensure that they are safe and they are secured. So for our departing seafarers, as part of the isolation requirements, we also arrange and charter hotels. We also have our dormitory, and our seafarers are being accommodated free full board and lodging. Here, we assist them in the renewal of their licenses and certificates and other documents. We also ensure that their visits in the office are only to absolute minimum, meaning if only we have to deploy them, they have to come over to the company to take their documents, take their cash advances, to take their travel allowance, and of course the issuance of the working chairs. Rest are actually being done online. So we enhanced we eventually avail of further enhance the electronic banking system. That means all the payments are actually being done online for our seafarers, like final wages accounts, the payment of sick leave, salary loans, etc. So we also facilitate at least the transportation of our seafarers in the vaccination sites, like Amosop is one of them, and tent in Las Piñas, billiard tent in Las Piñas is also one of the favorite destinations. So we provide informations related to COVID. We provide them with hygiene materials like COVID kit that contains alcohol, mask, gloves when they depart and ready to join the vessel. We also enhance process automation and digitalization. And one of which was, like, for example, we do develop a contact tracing form. So it's hands-free. It's basically within the use of their app. They can provide, their information, like the temperature, whether they have COVID or not, things like this. We conduct electronic payment, online pre-departure orientation seminars, and everything, etc. Well, we also have enhanced our recruitment online, because recruitment is also one of the functions wherein our company is actually relying, especially now in the midst of the COVID. You cannot stop ships from operation. You normally have to continue the recruitment. It's an ongoing process. So even the recruitment and selection, even the evaluations are actually being done online during the heights of the pandemic. It's only now when the alert level eases a bit that we start to allow applicants to come into our office. We also have the written protocol to address the health and safety issues, because it's part of our obligation to instill safety in the workplace, not only for our seafarers but also for our team members. When there are symptomatic office personnel or even seafarers, we assist them for teleconsultations, and if needed, we also provide or assist them for swab testing in the comforts of their home, in isolation hotel, and other places of their domicile. Here, during the pandemic, we have a lot of tasks that suddenly emerge that were not expected. For example, we need to provide assistance to our joining crew. We need to provide assistance to our off-signing crew. We have to record seafarers that have been infected by COVID. We need to come up with contact tracing as part of the government regulation. We are also, in charge for their well-being and all other many things that we never have expected. We cannot delegate this task to the present employees or the present staff that we have doing the operation. Otherwise, our commitment to our daily tasks will be compromised. In this respect, we have to employ additional manpower to do the additional tasks that are not here present before the pandemic. In conclusion, I would like to point out, and this is indeed known, that 90% of the cargo being transported are being done at sea. And of course, this is the ships are being manned by our seafarers. That our seafarers, as we have mentioned earlier, are key workers. They are our modern day heroes. They are our economic heroes. They are also our economic contributor. In 2021, the seafarers alone have remitted an amount of 6.4 billion by way of allotments. So this is actually a big chunk of amount that boosts our economic progress in the Philippines. Having said that, first of all, allow me, in behalf of our licensed mining, of our partners in the industry, would like to thank the President for the creation of the Department of Migrant Workers. OFWs in particular will now have a one-stop shop under one roof. I appreciate as stated by our Honorable Secretary, we are in the process of transition, and the technical working group is crafting the implementing rules and regulation. The Department of Migrant Workers is in charge to safeguard the rights and promote the welfare of our millions of OFWs, including our seafarers. And thus, allow me please to propose the following for the consideration of our good secretary. Number one, that's the automation and digitalization. When we resolve into, for example, central database, because there were 7 agencies that will fall under the cloud of the migrant workers, the Department of Migrant Workers. That means if we have a central database, this will help our seafarers ease their documentations. Imagine you have to fill out the same information for 7 different agencies. So in fact, if we have a central database, this will improve work efficiency and eliminate big downtime. And point number 2 is the integration of OFW conciliation and mediation center within the umbrella of the Department of Migrant Workers, in order to focus on the cases of our modern day heroes, our bayani, and particularly the seafarers. So this mediation center will just focus on their case, and I think that would be very much appreciated by both the local mining agencies and then our modern day heroes, our seafarers. That ends my presentation, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Galvez. That was very, very, very interesting and, in fact, very illuminating, as I would call it. But let me just, what I have observed from Filipino seafarers today is that there is a growing number of female seafarers. Did I get it right? But let's discuss that in the question and answer later after our fourth speaker. So let me introduce our fourth speaker. As president of the Southeast Asian Placement Center Incorporated, Joel Ong developed his vast expertise in the healthcare recruitment industry over the last 20 years. His company has a unique direct hiring model that has attracted the most reputable and prestigious hospital systems in the United States and the United Arab Emirates, where he continues to deploy hundreds of Filipino registered nurses. The Southeast Asian Placement Center is also known in the industry and the healthcare community to practice the highest level of ethical recruitment and was recently certified in the United States by the CGFNS Alliance for Ethical International Recruiters. So Joel continues to lead a highly qualified team that firmly believes that Filipino nurses are some of the best. I would even say they are really among the best in the world. So our next speaker is Mr. Joel Ong. Sir, you have the floor. Mr. Joel?
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me just share my screen. Okay, and I'd also like to take the opportunity to greet the newly appointed Secretary for the Department of Migrant Workers, Secretary Mamao, also the former Deputy Administrator for OWA, Mr. Arnel Ignacio, also President CEO of Marlo Navigation, Tony Galvez, representing the mining agencies, moderators from the Manila Times, Conrad and the Fort, and our distinguished viewers, a pleasant good morning to you all. So I was asked to represent the healthcare sector. My agency, SIAPSI, we exclusively only recruit for the healthcare sector. We specialize in nursing. So the topics I'd like to discuss, an overview, are relevant topics for the healthcare sector, such as salary comparisons, the growth in global need for nurses, the revival of the US market, also new specific markets, Germany and Japan, also Australia, Canada, and the UK. Also touch on the limit on the healthcare workers set by the POA, the deployment cap, and also the Philippine nurse as a global brand. And lastly, something that's very dear to me, ethical recruitment. So let's begin first with the average annual RN salary. I think this is a slide which is will be of interest to many people. So let's start with the Middle East. Now, the Middle East being the biggest market for healthcare workers. So you have Saudi Arabia with an average salary for the Filipino nurses of 770,000. The source I got is payscale.com. So this is a comparison, apples to apples for each market. Saudi Arabia being the largest market for Filipino nurses. However, they also have the lowest of the salaries. No, it's still quite significant at 770,000, which is significantly higher than the average salary of Filipino nurses in the Philippines. No? So in the Philippines, you have different sectors. You have the private hospital systems in the large cities, and then you have the private hospitals in the provinces, and you have the government hospitals. We have seen that the government hospitals have increased the salaries for Filipino nurses, so we welcome that very much, to give higher salaries for Filipino nurses in the government hospitals here. The UAE being the next market, so they're also part of the Middle East. They're somewhat an upgrade to Saudi Arabia. A lot of nurses from Saudi Arabia transfer to the UAE, mainly because the salary is a little bit higher. And of course, the place also being more livable. No, UAE. I visit the UAE quite regularly, and the UAE is actually more like it's similar to a set of a movie, a futuristic movie. No, you have amazing buildings, infrastructure there. It also comes with very large malls, so that's also the downside with the UAE. So you have nurses who have a lot of temptations of spending a lot of their savings. So those are two biggest markets, the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. And then you have the next market, the UK. So we have a government-to-government agreement between the Philippine government and the UK government. And as you can see, the salary is pretty much double of the Middle East at almost 1.7 million being the average salary for the UK. However, even though this amount may seem large, you have to remember that the UK is quite expensive to live in. So even if you earn this amount, it is not easy to really save money in the UK. We have a lot of Filipino nurses moving to the UK now. And then you have Germany, also part of Europe. So there's also a government-to-government agreement between the Philippine government and German government. We have the Triple Win project. So Germany, they pay a little bit higher than the UK. And the intention for the Filipino nurses going to Germany is that they will be living there and migrating there with their families. The setback with Germany is that they have to learn German. I actually speak German because I learned at a very young age. I went to German school. And German is not an easy language to learn. I've spoken to a lot of nurses who trained for about 9 months for the German lessons, and they eventually gave up because they felt that they could not pass the exam. So it's quite challenging. So I tip my hat off to those nurses who have made it to Germany. I believe there are over 1,500 already. Then the next is Japan, that have a slightly higher salary. They also have a government-to-government agreement with the Philippine government. Now, Japan is attractive because I think everybody loves Japan. It's quite near. It's only a 3-hour flight. It's a very safe place. The Japanese are very kind people, very kind employers. So it's quite attractive for Filipino nurses to go there. But however, the challenge is also the language barrier. They have to pass the exam in Japanese. So that's also one barrier. No? Then you have Australia and Canada. So as you can see, it's a significant jump in the average salary. Australia being almost 2.5 million and Canada 2.7 million. So both these countries, they rank very high in the best places to live. The lifestyle, safety, good for families. So that's very attractive to Filipino nurses. So these are markets open to Filipino nurses. However, the challenge with these two countries that they, in the past, did not recognize the Philippine nursing curriculum immediately. So you would have to take a bridging course in these countries prior to becoming recognized as a full-fledged nurse. Now, the top of the food chain is the U.S. The U.S., as you can see, the average salary for Filipino nurses is almost 3.6 million pesos. This is average salary. U.S. employers, they pay Filipino RNs equal to any American-born and American-educated nurse. So talagang pantay tayo. The moment we get there, we're equal to all the American nurses. We earn the same amount as the American nurses. Nurses earn as much as even 5 million pesos for those. They also credit the history or the experience of the nurse. So they credit that if you've worked for 15 years already in the Middle East or in the Philippines, and then they credit that and you could earn as much as 5 million pesos in the US. In addition, Filipino RNs go to the US with an EB3 immigrant visa or a green card and can bring their spouse and unmarried children under 21. So basically, the nice thing about the US is that they can bring their family. So there's no separation of the family in this case. And the spouse can also work. They also have the license or the correct visa to be able to work. Unlike an H-1B visa, which is a working visa, the spouse cannot work. But an EB3 immigrant visa, the spouse can work. So we have a lot of nurses who have moved to the US, and if they're dual income, they can save quite a lot of money. Okay, so now this slide is about the U.S. visa retrogression has ended. So for basically the U.S. was somewhat not really closed, but a lot of nurses didn't go to the US between 2010 and 2019 because there was a wait with the visas. The average wait was about 7 years. No? So during that time, a lot of the nurses who were intending to go to the US, they actually shifted and they ended up going to the UAE, which was the new market, Saudi Arabia also. So a lot of them went to the Middle East. And now the US has opened as of October 2020. The priority date is current, meaning to say that a qualified nurse from the Philippines who has passed the NCLEX exam can now theoretically be interviewed, offered a job, and deployed to the US with his or her family within 6 to 12 months. Okay, so it's open, and for those who want to go to the US or intend to go to the US, now is the time to go or to apply. Okay, so this slide talks about the NCLEX results. So this is a reflection of the trend of migration. As you can see, in 2009 was the height of when the Filipinos were going to the US. So there were 9,000 NCLEX passers. This is the licensure exam for the US in 2009. And then retrogression hit. So as you can see, the numbers declined. In 2014, the number of Filipino nurses that passed the NCLEX exam was down to only 900. Now in 2021, this has gone up again to 4,800 nurses that have passed the NCLEX exam for 2021. So we're at about half the level of 2009. Okay. As you can also see, we are in the forefront of international nurses all around the world. As you can see, from 2009, we represent almost 70% of Filipino international nurses taking the NCLEX exam. Okay. Okay, so this one is a slide about migration to the US. The main point of this is from 1988 to 2019, it's about a 31-year period. The average number of nurses that migrated to the US or went to the US was 3,640 per year. Now, as we went along from 2006 to 2019, this number diminished to 1,559 per year. So it went less than half. And then from, I'm sorry, so that's 99 to 2019. From 2006 to 2019, this went further down to 877 per year. And you have to include the years from 2006 to 2010 prior to retrogression. So if you were to count from 2010 during retrogression to 2020, I would say there would be probably less than 500 nurses entering the US. So in that point of view, it is not a threat for the Philippine government to losing our nurses to the US. It's still a very small number. Okay, so nursing crisis. Do we have a nursing shortage? Yes, it's global. The nursing shortage is global. And I just wanted to say, can you hear me and can you see the screen? I just wanted to check on that.
Yes,
Yes,
the one you shared.
Okay. Okay, so the nursing crisis. So basically in the US, you have 4 million registered nurses employed in the US. And in 2022, this report shows that there's a shortage of 1.1 million new nurses. From 2020 to 2030, the US Bureau of Labor Statistics projects 194,500 average annual openings for nurses. So when the Philippines supplies, I would say at its height, about 5,000 or 8,000 nurses a year. Right now, we're only supplying about 1,000, going up to perhaps 5,000 in the next couple of years. This is still a very, very small number compared to what the US needs. Fortunately for us, it's really the time for the Filipino nurse, because India, being also one of the suppliers of international nurses, they are retrogressed to 2012, meaning to say that Indian nurses, they have an 11-year wait right now to enter. So that's why the US hospitals are not petitioning for them, because they have an 11-year wait. Okay, this slide is a comparison between direct hire and U.S. staffing agencies. So these are two programs which I find very significant. Now, so we adhere to the direct hire. Both programs have pros and cons, have advantages and disadvantages. So basically, with a direct hire, the employer, the petitioner, the visa sponsor will be the hospital itself in the U.S. So they'll be the ones petitioning for you. They'll have their own assigned immigration lawyer handling the immigration and sponsorship. With you, if you join a U.S. staffing agency, right now the majority of Filipino nurses sign up with U.S. staffing agencies. These are the big staffing agencies that are very aggressive with their marketing here in the Philippines. When you join them, you will be employed by the U.S. staffing agency, and then the staffing agency will be assigning their employees, their nurses, to their clients, and the clients are a mix from big hospitals needing hundreds of nurses to small clinics in the middle of the Midwest where they might need only 2 nurses. No, so these are two different models. In terms of salary, being a direct hire, you'll be earning exactly the same as an American nurse you'll be working with, exactly because you are in their payroll. They're in the same payment, you have the same deal, basically. With agency, the agency basically charges an hourly fee to the client, and then they pay their salary to the Filipino nurse. So those are the difference. Generally, the salary is higher with in a direct hire model if you're directly hired by the employer. Benefits also the same. You'd have the same benefits as the employer. Staffing agencies have somewhat similar, but not exactly the same benefits. No. Location of work is very important. So when you are directly hired and you apply to a specific hospital in the U.S., you know exactly which hospital you're applying to. You know exactly where you're going to be assigned, which city, which state. With the staffing agency, they are not completely sure. They cannot really guarantee that you'll be working in a particular with a particular client. So that may change because it also depends when you arrive in the U.S. and to see if the vacancies are still open for a particular client they were intending you to go to. Term-wise, generally for direct hires, the intention is for you to stay for either 2 years, the contracts are normally 2 years or 3 years, while in staffing agency, it's usually between 3 and 3.5 years. Liquidated damages. So this is very important. Now, liquidated damages is basically a term which a lot of OFWs have to face. So this is in case they break the contract, they don't finish the contract. So with a direct hire model, they have to follow all the POLO and POA regulations. Using staffing agencies also should do the same. However, since there are different layers with the staffing agencies, often they're able to insert exorbitant buyout clauses. Okay, but then again, using U.S. staffing agencies, there are also certain advantage with them, and they're the majority of the recruits right now are through staffing agencies. However, quite recently, a lot of the bigger hospital systems, the very established hospital systems, are now shifting towards a direct hire model. Okay, so I touched on Australia earlier. So Australia, before, the problem was you need to take a bridging course to go to Australia. A lot of Filipinos want to go to Australia. It's quite near. It's only 7 hours of flight to Sydney. They have relatives there, very good benefits, very safe, good place to live. However, it is not. There was a bridging course requirement where you had to stay for 3 months, but that has changed since 2020. So now there's an assessment that has to be done. You can now take an NCLEX exam and take an OSCE exam also, so you can actually do it without the bridging course. The difference between an NCLEX in the USA and Australia, the NCLEX in the USA is somewhat cheaper. It costs anywhere between $700 to $1,500 to take the NCLEX exam for the US. However, there is a waiting period now, eligibility to take the exam. It's between 6 to 7 months. With Australia, it's only 1 to 3 months because it's quite new, it's newly open, but of course, it's more expensive. That's the trade-off. The trade-off, it's between 4,000, it's a bit over 4,000 US dollars. So it's faster, but more expensive. However, both of them you can take and then be transferred. There's something called endorsements. So it depends on, you can be, whichever state you want to live in the US, you can actually work there with an endorsement. Okay, so this one is about Canada. So right now, I was informed that the Philippine ambassador to Canada, Ambassador Robles, is working very hard to match the Philippine nursing curricula with the Canadian nursing curricula, so that we will also have Filipinos be recognized once the Filipino nurse passes the exam. They'll be recognized as a nurse and not have to take a bridging course. So that's on the works right now, but we're not there yet. Okay, so there's Japan also, another market, government to government also. Also, the challenge there is they have to take a 12-month intensive Japanese language test, which is quite challenging. Then there's Germany, the Triple Win project. As I mentioned earlier, they have the average salary, as you can see here, is 165,000 a month, or maybe around 1.7, 1.8 million a year. However, you also have to take a 10-month proficiency test, and right now it's quite challenging to pass. Okay, so next would be the POA cap on annual deployment for healthcare workers. So now many of you may know that in 2020, during the height of the pandemic, the Philippine government had to protect the interests of the hospitals, of our healthcare system in the Philippines. So we had to come up with, there was actually a ban initially, which was quite controversial, but that shifted to a cap. So in 2020, there was a cap of 5,000 workers. In 2021, it increased to 6,500. Followed by 2022, where it's 7,000. So it's steadily increasing. These caps are essentially targeted for the Middle East, where most of the nurses go. They are exempted. The ones who are exempted are those who have government-to-government agreements, and the US, where you have an immigrant visa. Okay, so Philippine Nurse as a global brand. I've always felt that the Philippine Nurse, especially now after the pandemic or during the pandemic, the Philippine nurses really got the credit that was due to them. So when I say a global brand, what are we thinking of? Mercedes-Benz or Nike or Boeing. No, these are big brands. The Philippine Nurse is just equal to these big brands. So as you can see, Prince Charles had very nice words talking about the Philippine nurses. The same with Joe Biden about the sacrifice of Philippine nurses. And you also have Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth, who also had a dedication to Philippine nurses. In the bottom right-hand corner, there was a very famous picture of Boris Johnson wearing a Philippines T-shirt, and he also credited his recovery. I think he had a severe bout of COVID early on, and he credits his recovery to the Filipino nurses that cared for him. Okay, and then there's ethical recruitment. So it's something very dear to me. As mentioned in my introduction, we recently got certified as an ethical recruiter by the US CGFNS, and I really adhere to ethical recruitment. And I think it's something that we welcome the new Department for Migrant Workers that will really be able to consolidate all the agencies and really ensure that ethical recruitment is practiced. So we welcome everything that can be done in the government to protect the Filipino OFWs, especially the healthcare sector. This is my last slide. So basically, to our beloved Filipino healthcare heroes, paano ba lumipad? So I have an acronym here, LIPAD. So firstly is long-term. I would like to address that from the government point of view. I would like to position that we should always look long-term. We should always see that the nurses are a very big contributor to the economy, as you can see from the very high salaries that they receive, the numbers and the opportunities they have, that they will continue to be a major factor in the contribution to remittances to the Philippines. So we should look long term. We should have programs to increase the number of Filipino enrollees in nursing schools, perhaps also enhance and increase the number of nursing schools. So, of course, first and foremost, to make sure that we have an adequate supply of healthcare workers for the Philippines. And then, of course, the next stage would be to be able to supply the various markets all around the world where there's opportunities for Filipino nurses with high-paying jobs. No? For the Filipino OFWs, the healthcare workers, I also would like to encourage you to look long-term and not to think of making decisions based on quick gains. Your career spans for more than 40 years. So all time look long-term to perhaps create a plan, a career path for yourself of perhaps when you graduate from nursing, how many years you want to work in the Philippines, and then where you want to go after. Perhaps you want to work in the Middle East first or the UK for the first 5 years. And then the next few years, maybe perhaps migrate to either Canada, Australia, or the US. So always look long term. The next one is integrity and character. These are two words which I always share with our nurses. So character basically is your work ethic, your honesty, how you carry yourself. Are you a positive person or are you a troublemaker? Are you a solutions person? So you'll always be judged by your character. Now, integrity is the same as character, but my definition is character is what people see, what you'll be judged on, and integrity is when nobody's looking. It's your behavior, your work ethic when no one's looking. And some people, they do things because they're watched, and when no one's looking, they have a different attitude. So I would like to encourage people to always watch their integrity and character. The next is the P is passion. So always have a passion for what you do. We've had a lot of healthcare workers who joined the healthcare sector only because their parents asked them to. And some healthcare workers ended up going to BPOs, even though the BPO sector didn't really need them, but they welcomed them. So a lot of nurses who ended up going to the BPOs to earn more money because they pay more than the hospitals here in the Philippines. However, it's also perhaps that they didn't really have the passion for healthcare. As you can see, the passion is very, very important. During the pandemic, you can see that all these healthcare workers, the frontliners, they did everything. It was not about the money anymore. It was really about their mission and their passion to help others. You can see it in the Philippines, in the hospitals here, and also abroad. The next would be the assets. So assets, you are your biggest asset. Always remember that. So invest in yourself, educate yourself, always see yourself as an asset that has a lot of opportunities and build assets. So we always encourage also the OFWs to have a savings plan, a financial plan, because it's very sad when you see OFWs who have worked very hard and they come back, they don't really have any savings, or they've spent their money and not wisely. But we also have a lot of OFWs and a lot of nurses who have invested wisely and built a lot of wealth. They've invested in property, for example, and they have passive income. So assets is something that you should accumulate. And lastly would be Dior. So Dior is a term I recently learned from the younger generation. So often those that dabble in cryptocurrency and NFTs. So Dior is do your own research. So very important is for our OFWs to do their own research. Now, don't just follow what your friends say. Don't just jump at the first opportunity you get. So always know the agency. Make sure you know which agencies focus or specialize in your industry. So also know which agencies are ethical recruiters. Know, of course, your employer, the employer applying to, are they good employers? Do they have Filipinos working there? Are they good employers? So know everything you can. Do your own research. Don't just follow. So with that ends my talk. I am a true believer that the nurses are heroes and I'd like to see the growth of the Filipino nursing community, both in the Philippines and outside the Philippines. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that comprehensive and motivating presentation, Joel. In fact, I think your talk was so motivating, it made some of us wonder whether we should have chosen a career path in the healthcare industries. So what do you think,
Yeah.
Conrad?
What I know is that nurses are very, very hardworking people. I mean, they save lives. They take care of those who are, not doing well. And I mean, it takes some kind of human touch to become a nurse. And I think the Filipino character has that type of, the human touch. I'm sure all of you agree. And
Yes.
and if you ask me, maybe if my life would start all over again, if I would go into the healthcare industry, maybe yes, because I just discovered in the recent years that I'm a very compassionate person, and I'm sure all of us here are also compassionate. So let us now go to the question and answer.
Yes, maybe we invite Mr. Mamao, Mr. Galvez. If everyone can join us now for the open forum. Are you ready, gentlemen?
Yeah, Mr. Arnel, I think you want to raise a point.
Yeah, I would just, with the permission of the good secretary, I'm sure he will agree with me. You almost brought me to a standing ovation to President Joel Ong and President Anthony Galvez. You're bringing the OWA to high heavens. Listening to you is like the blueprint of paradise for us, because I truly hope that the land base, referring to President Antonio Galvez, can have the same structure. Now, you almost sound like you have a duplication of OWA, of our function, and I must really commend the structure of the Marine. And Mr. Joel Ong, I'd like to add, because we have a program every Saturday. It's Oh My Job. And I'd like to share a very touching story of a nurse who is a favorite in the UK, because she sings to the patients, and listening to how you are bringing our good OFWs to the world. You are, I must say, you're bringing me to do a standing ovation. I truly hope that what was shared to us, Secretary, can be duplicated and in the land base. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. You're energizing me. You're energizing me to keep on telling stories. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very, very enlightening.
Maybe we can direct our first question to Secretary Mamao. We have one from Agnes Alimbog. She's the program director of the Filipinos World. So the question goes, how will you ensure continuity of the rules and regulations in the full implementation of the department with the new administration coming on after the elections? Is there a guarantee you yourself will still remain as the secretary?
Yes, maybe, I don't know, the signal here is not good. I'm missing some of the questions.
Well, the basic question is that how will you be able to ensure the continuity of the rules and regulations that you intend to implement in your department, considering that we are in the transition period from one administration? There's from the previous generation and then the new one after to be elected. Is there a guarantee of continuity of the programs that you'll be setting up?
Well, as far as the programs are concerned, these are matters that can be reviewed from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And listening from the very vital information of our speakers who are experienced in the service industry and in the healthcare business, I think there is a need for us to look into the current labor agreements between our country and other foreign countries. Citing, for instance, the issue on the recognition of the competence of our seamen in foreign countries. We had been recognized by one country, for instance, the Republic of Iran. And that recognition of the competence of our seamen is one of the factors contributing to the employment of many qualified seamen from our country. Because of that recognition, it opened the European labor market. Now, in regard to the healthcare industry, insofar as these big countries are concerned, like the United States of America, the European continent, Australia, we may have to review the labor agreement that we have with the United States, for instance. From the information I got from our people in the marketing department, the last agreement that we had signed with America was in 1968. So this is one area that we have to look into, because it is very important that when we generate a labor agreement with a foreign country, we may have to include the other sectors of our OFW community. We will not be concentrating only on the land-based migrant workers, but considering the problems that are being faced by our people in the seafarer sector of our country, we may have to come up with an agreement that will protect the interest and the welfare of our seafarers in the country. The implementing rules and regulations that we have right now has one provision on the putting up of a maritime industry tripartite council. So we will encourage the constant dialogue between those in the industry and the group representing the shipper group, shipper sector of our country, for discussion on important policies, recommendations, concerns, so that there will be continuing concern and continuing solution to the problems that our overseas Filipino workers in foreign countries are facing. So I'm very glad that I was given this opportunity to participate in this forum in the presence of our knowledgeable two gentlemen from the private sectors, learning a lot from them. This will open up so many discussions and proposals that we can later on institutionalize in the recruitment of land-based and sea-based workers. Our department definitely will be looking into this, and we will now continue reviewing the labor agreement that we have entered into between our country and countries employing our migrant workers. And we will also look into the countries that until now have no labor agreement between the Philippines and these countries. I'm citing Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong. We don't have labor agreements with these countries right now. We can do a lot for this, for the migrant workers. As a matter of fact, the Department of Migrant Workers is created for the migrant workers. It is by the migrant workers, for the migrant workers, and of the migrant workers. So I'm very glad about this, the creation of this department, because we can now focus on the development of these industries, the land-based industry, the sea-based industry, on the recruitment of migrant workers. This is one area really that we have to protect, because without the migrant workers now of the country, we will have problems on the economy. Just citing one instance, the suspension of the recruitment of domestic workers in Saudi Arabia. This really had cost a lot in the economy of our country, because we are deprived of the dollar remittances of domestic workers who would have been recruited during all these months, while this suspension is taking effect. I had issued an order for the lifting of the suspension of the verification of employment contracts for new hires of domestic workers, but there is one conflicting memorandum from the Department of Labor that they are not going to respect the department order that I had issued. So this is a matter that we have not yet settled, and hopefully we can settle this in a very short period of time, because this affects our labor relations with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and even the relations of our country with the members of the Gulf Council. So this is one area that we have to continue in reviewing what are the important measures that should be taken, policies, in order that we can support the recruitment industry. As I said, one is the review of our agreement with foreign countries like the United States of America. And we don't have this agreement reviewed for quite for many years. This agreement was signed in 1968, and we have this information from Joe Long that our opportunities in the United States has a problem because of so many factors, and this is one thing that we have to review, and we will definitely be in contact with those in the health industry, like Joe Long, the moment we will go further in reviewing this agreement with, for instance, with the United States of America. So again, thank you very much. And if there are other questions that you intend to ask for me.
Actually, Secretary, I'm glad that you raised, you mentioned that last item regarding Labor Secretary and the issue of Saudi Arabia, because it was one of the questions that was raised by our Manila Times reporter assigned to cover. But I think, Conrad, there are other questions from our Times reporter that you might want to raise for Secretary to, as a follow-up. For instance, there were also two sets of IRR for the DMW, one submitted by your office and the other by the Transition Committee, which under the law creating the DMW is the one tasked to craft the IRR. So there's also a letter of Executive Secretary Medialdea saying that the DMW is not yet constituted, which in effect means that till the DMW is constituted, the POEA and OWA and other agencies will remain under the jurisdiction of DOLE. Would you want to comment on that, Secretary?
Yes, I'm very glad that you had brought this up. So the people will have the opportunity to listen on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
The implementing rules and regulations that I had signed and approved is the implementing regulations actually approved by the Transition Committee. I had been calling meetings of the Transition Committee. And unfortunately, some of the members of this Transition Committee refused to participate in the deliberations of the Transition Committee. They claimed that on the side of the Department of Foreign Affairs, there was no clearance from the Secretary of Foreign Affairs. On the side of the Department of Labor for ILAB and the Polo and the Reintegration Center attached to the OWA and that of the Maritime Polytechnic Institute, they were claiming that they had no authority from the Secretary of Labor to attend the meetings of the Transition Committee. So I had given them the chance until the last day when I signed the implementing rules and regulations to give their inputs, to give their comments, but they did not. The implementing rules and regulations that we had approved and submitted for publication to the UP Law Center, the National Register for Rules and Regulations, were actually approved on the basis of the provisions of the law. The other members of the committee did not attend. So in my meeting with the President and Secretary Middledia, I pointed out the reason why I signed the implementing rules and regulations on April 4, 2022. The other members of the committee refused to attend. And because they refused to attend, they abandoned their responsibilities. They waived the rights to participate in the deliberations of the committee. And because they had abandoned their rights and waived their obligations to participate in the proceedings of the committee, we approved the IRR, the implementing rules and regulations within the purview of the law. Now, in regard to the other implementing rules and regulations that were submitted for publication and signed by 6 members of the committee, these implementing rules and regulations was deliberated, was approved by the 6 members in 2 meetings. In 2 meetings that were held in March of 2022. But these meetings were not convened by me as chairman of the committee. It was convened by Secretary Middledia, who is not a member of this committee and whose position as executive secretary is not in the law creating the Department of Migrant Workers. So as far as the validity of the 2 IRR is concerned, our implementing rules and regulations of the Transition Committee that I had approved on April 4, and that was published on April 6, 2022, and became effective 15 days after April 6 of 2022, is the valid implementing rules and regulations. And that is the same implementing rules and regulations that are now being used by the Department of Budget and Management in crafting the staffing pattern. The basis of the staffing pattern will be the implementing rules and regulations that was duly published and that became effective after its publication. And it was done within the purview of the law creating the Department of Migrant Workers. Now, you asked me about the claim of some sectors in the executive department of our government that this department is not fully constituted because we don't have the budget for the year 2023. We don't have yet the staffing patterns, and we have not yet trained the people who will be running the future, running the Department of Migrant Workers. There is no question about it. We don't have quarrel with that claim, with that argument, that this department is not fully constituted. I agree, because we don't have the 2023 budget. And because we don't have the 23 budget and the staffing pattern and the training of the people who will run the department, it is right to say that the department is not fully operational. But going on to the other provisions of the law, Section 4, Section 19, Section 26, you will see from these provisions of the law that the department, within this 2-year transition period, can operate initially, and that is what we are doing right now. This department is operating initially because under Section 26 of the law, it provides in the initial implementation of the law, the budget of this department shall be taken from the budget of all the agencies subsumed by this department. And that is the provision of the law insofar as the initial operation of this law is concerned. Where are we going to get the budget? We don't have the 2023 budget, but the law allows the use of the existing budget of the different agencies subsumed by this department. And the department also, the provision of the law creating the department provides that all employees and officials of this new department, of all the agencies subsumed by this department will be holding their positions in holdover capacity.
Okay, that's very clear, Secretary. I think you've pretty much hammered the point home that in spite of the lack of resources, you do have jurisdiction and therefore can interface with the agencies under your purview in terms of the implementation of your programs.
That is the situation, and that's actually the authority that we have within the law.
Mm-hmm.
The secretary of this department is given certain mandates under the law creating this department, and these powers and functions of the secretary of this department and the powers and functions of the department are all self-executory provisions. Mm-hmm. They are not dependent on any condition, and because they are secretary provisions, the secretary therefore can exercise the powers and functions of the office of the secretary within the purview of the law.
Yes,
the secretary can exercise his plenary power of supervision and control over all these agencies subsumed by this department. And in paragraph A of Section 8, it provides that the powers and functions of the administrator of the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration have to be exercised by the secretary of this department. That is the meaning of that particular section. And that is the reason why
You brought up the OWA, Secretary. You brought up the OWA department which is under your purview.
As far as the OWA is concerned, under the law, the OWA is considered an attached agency of this department. Just like before, when the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration was considered an attached agency of the Department of Labor.
Mm-hmm.
So as an attached agency of the Department of Migrant Workers, I don't have complete supervision and control over OWA. But we will have to have coordination in terms of the preparation of policies and programs of the Overseas Workers Welfare Agency.
If I may direct the question to OWA Assistant Administration Ignacio, because you mentioned about the funds, no? There is a follow-up question from William De Pasupil, our Manila Times reporter covering this event. He asks, what's the status of the OWA fund now, considering that there was a slump in deployment during the last 2 years of the pandemic, which means lesser contribution, and considering also that OWA shouldered all the expenses of returning OFWs at the height of the pandemic?
Yes, for now, our OWA fund stands at 18,313,830,589.57 as of February 2022. There was a slump in the collection 2020 of 38.76%. It was a sad 807,226.
Yes.
But this went up in 2021, 24.69%. And we were able to collect 1,357,381,696. Now, if to William De Pasupil, who asked a question, it was not only the OWA fund which was used to fund all the emergency requirements for our OFW during the pandemic. We were provided with from the General Appropriations Fund of our Emergency Repatriation Fund, which came from the GAA. So in partnership with our funds, ito yung sumagot doon sa ating mga hotels, transportation, food. So napangalagaan natin mabuti yung ating OWA fund during this period. Tinulungan tayong mabuti ng pamahalaan tungkol dito. So ngayon, we'll be looking forward to an additional 11.4 billion, which we are getting in tranches monthly. So idugtong ko na rin na if there will be questions fearing that they will not be paid by OWA, mag-relax kayo. The money is coming in. Huwag kayong mag-alala. Huwag kayong mag-alala.
Well, I'm sure all our OFW sectors are very appreciative of all the support from OWA, from the new migrant workers department. But sadly, the reality is there have been agencies within the industry that haven't been able to survive the pandemic. Maybe I can ask Joel and Tony to share with us what you know about agencies that haven't been able to survive the pandemic, or the fallout in terms of the business side of things. Joel or Tony, whichever of you would want to answer.
Okay, let me attempt to answer that. No, so one is I'm not familiar with agencies that have not been able to survive, but I can tell you on our end, it was survival mode, definitely survival mode on our end. You have to remember that SIAPSI only we exclusively cater to the healthcare sector. No, so when we were hit with the deployment ban, that was quite tough and quite challenging. Of course, we understand the rationale behind it. So we had to survive that. So basically, it was very challenging, and we're very happy for that to have been revised to have a cap. I had the pleasure of being able to speak to Secretary Bello at one point, actually suggesting a cap during the ban. And I'm not sure if my conversation with him had any kind of influence, but within 2 months, suddenly there was a cap that was made. No, so having said that, definitely recruitment firms were hard hit, whether it's healthcare related or not. Of course, we were probably the hardest hit because healthcare, but I would imagine the manning agencies are those who were probably supplying to the cruise lines. I mean, you have to remember the cruise lines went on a standstill, and maybe many other sectors also. You have the F&B sector. There are some agencies that do only F&B. So, of course, when F&Bs are closed, they're going to be hiring anymore. And, of course, the overall travel was also very limited. So I think everybody was hit. We are very happy to say that things are moving very, very quickly forward, and we are now catering still to our two markets, and the U.S. being our largest market now. So we welcome that.
How about Tony? Would you want to add to that?
Yes, actually, in the maritime sector, I have not heard any of our colleagues in the industry that have followed up. No. We have a standstill, yes. For example, between March of 2020 and August, since we have high, alert level, and at that time we have lockdowns, we hardly can move. But that was we have a standstill. We have some decrease in our deployment. Simply because those seafarers we have on board have been replaced temporarily by other nationalities. And the market is picking up again. Yes, as what Joel had said, the cruise lines have been hit very badly by the pandemic. And as I mentioned earlier during my presentation, those ships, for example, these cruise liners have been, in line in 2020, end of May, in Manila Bay, and we're talking about thousands of seafarers, Filipino seafarers, but they're picking up again. Means that during the pandemic there was a standstill, but of course, you know how it is. The ships on the shipyard we have heard of a lot of orders. That means when you have ships in the yard or in the shipyard that's actually being constructed, you can expect that there will be more and more seafarers that will be required. And Filipinos have actually acquired about more than 30% representations in the world fleet. We have approximately at the moment 1.6 million seafarers around the world, and 40% of it or 30% of it is actually from the Philippines. So it was a temporary setback, and actually it's not. It's just it's just a matter of time. It's a cycle. At the moment, it's down, but it will go up again.
Are there any countries that only accept workers inoculated with Western-made vaccines? And what's the status on a sort of universal vaccination card that's accepted in any country of application for work?
Okay. Actually, seafarers, since we have a lot of vaccines now flowing into the country, so there are hardly, if at all, seafarers that have been deployed without vaccination. Other companies do require their seafarers to be vaccinated to begin with. So from our side, I can only speak for our company, Marlin Navigation. More than 90% or 91% have been fully vaccinated. And of course, when I say fully vaccinated, they have 2 doses of vaccination. Some are, of course, they just have the first dose, but we basically those that are being deployed are fully vaccinated.
Okay, well, Conrad, it looks like our speakers have painted a more hopeful picture for our OFWs. I suppose their speeches jive with your initial observations that you mentioned at the start of our forum.
Yes. But I would like to raise one more point before we conclude this event. One of our listeners, that's Architect June Palafox, said that isn't it high time that we rebrand our Filipino workers instead of calling them OFWs or overseas Filipinos? Do you think we should call them just plain Filipino expatriates? Because I also have observed in the Philippines that we also have lots of expats, and Indians, British, and Americans. Do you think that we should also rebrand our Filipinos who work abroad as such? We call them Filipino expatriates instead of OFWs. Don't you think so, the fourth?
Is this from the point of view that to be able to command higher salaries or equivalent to those of
yes, among others. It's also to level up the respect for Filipinos who work abroad. To level it up, something like that. Okay. So yes, we had a very fruitful discussion, and let's just hope that things will turn for the better. in the next months or years to come for both the local and global economy, so we can deploy more OFWs, and yes, I'm very sure they will continue to be our heroes. And yes, Mr. Ardel Ignacio, you have last words?
I have an additional suggestion in conjunction with Architect Palafox. Our domestic workers, our HSWs, are prime favorites of a preference of our brothers in the Middle East. So baka mas maganda nga, tawagin na natin silang domestic managers because that's really what they do. Diba? And if I may just very shortly introduce a topic which I would appeal to everyone here to give us some assistance to. One problem rarely discussed that OWA comes face to face every day, aside from us solving the problems of OFWs, is when a middleman comes in between us and the OFWs in helping. Now, what am I trying to say? The media is there, advocates are there, but then there are no guidelines as to how far they can help. And it's a very complicated and complex thing, especially in the Middle East, when the culture is not understood. And most of the time, what works in the Philippines does not work and can provide and can result in tragic situation for our OFWs. For example, exposing the residences of their employers through video is totally a taboo in the Middle East. But then when it is reported here in the Philippines, kasi dito madali, di ba? We easily understood that when one asks for help, ang dali-dali niyang i-video and everybody understands, and there's really nothing wrong with it. But that is very offensive in the Middle East. So instead of us na makakatulong ng mabilis, it complicates the problem. Now, what am I trying to say? We really need a lot of support when it comes to communication regarding the role of OWA. That's why I started my presentation by introducing what we do. But then the OFWs have been a very, very interesting sector wherein everybody wants to participate in helping. But it's like helping somebody drowning na hindi naman talaga expert lumangoy yung sumasagip. And I'm sure Mr. Galvez understands what I'm saying. Na pagka pumapasok na iba, tapos mali-mali ang mga sinasabi, pero kasi sa kanya, supported siya ng kanyang pakiramdam na siya ay matulungin, it gets our OFWs into a fix that is very difficult to untie. So, ako nag-a-appeal that sana dumating yung panahon, Secretary Mumao, na there must be some sort of guidelines, parameters, or affiliation whatsoever. Na not everybody who decides that he is helpful can come into the picture. Because remember, culture is a very deep subject in other countries. Hindi yan biro. Dito sa atin, madalas kasi sa atin, mababaw lang ang ano-ano eh. Pero especially in the Middle East, the things that we think is just fun is very offensive to them. Now, we do not come to these countries to change how they think or to change how they live their lives. We have to fully understand that and adjust to that. Hindi ko sa kinakampihan sila, no? But then the result is, napapahamak yung ating mga OFWs doon sa mga innocent nating steps dito, motivated by your passion to help. So I'm appealing din sana if hindi ko alam kung ito yung tamang forum, but I'm just taking my chances na OWA has been so dedicated sa pagtatrabaho helping our OFWs, and the people here are unquestionable reputation to help. Kaya lang humihirap sa amin eh. Pagka may humigit na, ilang beses na ako nag-a-appeal dun sa ating mga media partners din. Naupuan natin, mag-forum din tayo na pagdating sa mga bansa na medyo kakaiba ang kultura, unawain natin, and then para kung tutulong sila, in harmony tayong tumutulong.
That's right. Education is necessary.
Oo, hindi kasi siya pwedeng, kasi gusto mo tumulong, aarya ka na. Kami ngayon, pagka naman na nagpapaliwanag, kami yung babatikusin na mabagal kami. But then, it's not as simple as that. We are dealing with the whole world. We're not, the standard of the world is not just the standard of our country. So, kaya ako nag-a-appeal. I hope that we can be provided with understanding, patience, and support pagdating dito sa bagay na ito. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Arnel, for that very nice wrap-up message. I think, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to have you on board with us, and we look forward to having you with the Manila Times Online Business Forum. Shukran, and maraming salamat sa inyo lahat. Thank you for joining us.
Maraming salamat din.
Again, our speakers are Migrant Workers Secretary Abdullah Mamao, OWA Deputy Administrator for Administration and Fund Management, Arnel Ignacio, and Marlow Navigation President and CEO, Antonio Galvez Jr. And of course, we had CFC President Joel Ong. We thank you all for sharing your opinions and letting us know more about the future that in store for our OFWs. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
What do you see in your future? Us, we see unlimited possibilities. This is why we are evolving to BPI AIA. To keep up with your ever-changing needs and to help bring you to the future you've always wanted. A future where you can live your life to the fullest. Where the people you love are better protected. Where everything is easier and faster. We're changing the way you live as we combine decades of local expertise, innovation, and leadership with the strength of one of Asia's largest life insurance companies. Count on us to keep evolving as fast as you do, to give you more protection and better services that will help you live healthier, longer, better lives. This is what we see in your future. And that future begins today. This is the new BPI AIA.
Sign up for a year and pay less than 71 pesos per month. Visit tmt.ph/digital to get your free 30 days of the Manila Times Digital Edition.